All right, hi guys. So, welcome back. I am setting up for the GAT today, so I won't be able to do a live meet with you. So, I thought I'd do the next best thing. We are going through genes and inheritance now. So, we're talking about how we get the genes and the alleles from our parents, all right, and what that means. And then we're going to talk about when we get back to school how these genes are carried through a population. All right. So let's start off. We know that we obviously get two copies of each chromosome. All right. So we get, say, this is chromosome one, we get one from our mum, one from our dad. So there we've got two copies. Okay. Now, these chromosomes are homologous chromosomes, so they're similar in size, similar in shape. We know all of this, all right? And they carry the same genes. Now, they carry the same genes, but they both contain, because one's from mum and one's from dad, they're not identical. They contain different alleles, and these are different forms of the gene, all right? So, alleles of the same gene. This gene, for example, could be hair color, this first gene. All right. This chromosome is carrying a blonde allele, and this chromosome is carrying um, a brown allele. That's just an example, and it would actually be the opposite way around. But so that's basically what we were talking about at the end of last term. All right. So our key terms is gene locus, that is the position of the gene on the chromosome, so where it is. Our genotype, the genotype is the set of genes or the alleles that we carry. And then phenotype, all right? Phenotype is our physical appearance. So let's think genotype being genes, geno, okay? What are we actually carrying? What physical alleles are we carrying? Are we carrying a blonde hair and a brown hair, or are we carrying two brown hair? Phenotype, physical appearance. So P for physical. So what are we expressing? What are we showing? All right. So you might have a brown hair and a blonde haired allele, but you're physically showing or expressing the trait of brown hair. You have brown hair. That is your phenotype. Do not overthink it. If it asks you for an individual's phenotype, you would write something like brown eyes. Like it's that simple, okay? If they're asking you for a genotype, you are going to write the alleles and the letters that are nominated for that allele. All right. So there are key terms. We just gone over homologous chromosomes. Okay. Now, because we have different forms of a gene, they sort of take a different rank. Okay. So our alleles can be dominant or recessive. Okay. Now, dominant means that it is going to be shown or expressed, I should say. It is going to be expressed at all times, okay? If a dominant allele is present, it will always be expressed. Okay, it is the more, I don't really know how to, it's the more dominant one, okay? Whereas if a recessive allele is present, it will only be expressed if there are two recessive alleles present, okay? So wherever there's a dominant one, it'll always take over and be expressed, okay? So, for example, with pigment-based genes, the darker the pigment, so brown hair, is more dominant over blonde hair, usually in humans, okay? So, wherever there is a brown-haired allele, brown hair will be expressed, okay? In the absence of that brown-haired allele, say you've got two blonde-haired alleles, that's where we will get our recessive trait coming through of blonde hair, all right? Now, how do we represent these? The capital letter is always the dominant allele. The lowercase letter is always the recessive allele. Now, these cannot be different letters, okay, because they are the same gene. So you'll see that every gene here, it's the same letter. So T, A, B, C, D. All right, even though some are capitals and some are lowercase. It is the same gene, therefore it's the same letter, and the capital and the lowercase are representing whether it's the dominant or the recessive allele. So they're different forms of the gene. That's why it's the same letter. The same gene, different form of it. Okay, so this individual, they have one dominant and one recessive allele for this T gene, whatever that is. All right. This individual has, yep, again, one dominant, one recessive. So their genotype for that gene would be capital A, little a. All right. Now, we call these different things, okay? So if you have the same alleles at a gene, it is called homozygous, okay? Homozygous for that trait. All right, and this person, because they have the same alleles, they are homozygous dominant. Again, this individual is homozygous for this trait here because they are the same alleles. Homozygous recessive. When you have different, it is heterozygous. So this individual is heterozygous for this gene or this trait because they have one capital, one dominant, and one recessive. All right, and they're heterozygous for these two as well because they're different. So homo, remember our prefix homo means same alleles. Hetero, prefix for different, they have different allele combinations. All right. So you can have a read of this yourself. I've just sort of explained it. Recessive is only expressed when two recessive alleles are paired together. Dominant, this allele will always, if it's present, it'll always be expressed because it masks our recessive allele. So for example, here's an example. This person has a genotype of two dominant alleles, BB, and they are expressing that brown-eyed trait. So their phenotype is brown eyes. This individual, their genotype is capital B, little b, so one dominant, one recessive. Because they are different, we call this heterozygous. But their phenotype is still brown eyes, so that dominant allele will always be expressed. This individual does not have a dominant allele. They are homozygous, recessive, so they have the same allele combination, and it's recessive, and therefore their phenotype is blue eyes. Okay, so that's the different combinations you can get with those alleles. All right. Now, this is what we are going to do. We're going to predict our offspring combinations. All right. So I could predict, for example, my husband and I, it's no secret, we are having a child in a short 3 months. Crazy, I know. I've got blue eyes and he has green eyes. So they are both quite recessive traits. So we can predict the eye color of our offspring. All right. If we knew our genotype, it would be much easier and we could use a monohybrid cross. Okay. Which is the mating between two individuals with different alleles at one genetic locus of interest. So we obviously have different alleles because we have different eye colors. All right, so we are looking at one genetic locus, so one gene in particular, eye color. And how would we do this cross? We would do a Punnett square. All right, so that the Punnett square is the diagram of the cross. So the monohybrid cross is the one gene that we're looking at and crossing or mating two individuals. The Punnett square is the actual diagram that we're going to do. Okay, so we could do a Punnett square and look at what combinations could be possible for this child. All right, now because we're both recessive traits, it is likely that this baby will come out with blue or green eyes. If it came out with brown eyes, then that's interesting. It must be down to mutation. All right, because otherwise one of us would have that brown-eyed phenotype. So here's what a Punnett square looks like. So you need to determine the parents' genotypes first, okay? So we have the mother and the father's genotype. all right? And we're going to write that up here. All right, so say that's the dad, that's the mum. So that's on the outside of the square. And then we start matching up, all right? So remember that in our gametes, our sperm and our egg cells, all right, only our homologous chromosomes are being separated, okay, in that process. And then say this little allele goes into one sperm cell, and this little allele goes into another sperm cell. This goes into an egg cell, and this goes into an egg cell. And then they join because they fertilize. So that's why we're joining them up. Okay, so this B with this B. If they join, all right, they're going to create that combination. If these two join, they're going to create this combination. If these two join, they're going to create this combination, and so on. Okay, so we end up with 4 different possible combinations that the offspring could be left with. Okay, and then we can come up with different ratios. So in this Punnett square, the offspring have a 25% chance of having blue eyes. All right, but most of them, 75%, will have brown eyes, and that's their phenotype. All right, so that's how we can predict offspring combinations. All right, so I'm going to show you some examples. I'm just going to model them. If you want to have a go on your own, by all means, go for it. But for those of you that are still a bit stuck, I'll just take you through some problems. So we can use this in our knowledge to work out situations like this. So for example, we've got to read it. Normal pigmentation in humans is the result of a dominant allele. Okay, so I'm going to start by showing my working out and writing it down so that I'm, I guess, modeling my thinking. So A is dominant, capital A, and that means normal. Hate that word, but that's what they've used. Okay, our second allele, must be, go away, a lowercase a, all right, albinism. So that's no pigmentation. That results from the recessive allele. Okay, so albinism. So we've got 2 alleles here for one trait, which is pigmentation. Capital A, sorry, for normal, and lowercase a for albinism. All right, so they're the alleles that we're working with. Now these 2 heterozygous individuals, they plan to have a child. Now so we've got to work out what cross are we doing? What are the genotypes of these individuals? They are heterozygous, meaning different. So they must have a combination of different alleles. And the only heterozygous combination you can have is that. Okay, they must be different. So they got one of each. And this is how we represent a cross with a little X in the middle. All right, so we're doing a cross with these. They want to have a child. Now let's figure out whether they can or not. Or not can, but whether their child will have albinism. So first, A, what are the phenotypes of the parents? Remember, our dominant allele is always going to be expressed. Okay, so both of them have normal pigmentation. So you would write your answer in a full sentence, but I'm just going to write normal pigmentation. All right, so that's A anyway. B, what are the chances that the child will be an albino? So I say albino. Okay, so this is where we have to do our Punnett square. All right, so I'm going to insert a table just so it's easier for me, if I can. Table, blip, blip, blip. Anyway, I'm just going to do a big one. So we're going to do A, the parents' genotypes go around the sides, okay? And then we're going to start filling in the box. So we're taking these 2 alleles here.